Welcome to In God We Trusted. I'm your host, Will. I'm here alongside Sam. Sam, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to be talking about one of the issues that a lot of people think is going to be the major issue of our lifetime and maybe our kids' lifetime, but very few people talk about it as though it's right in our face as a problem, and that is the looming crisis in fertility. And I just kind of want to unpack that. Like, what does the Bible say about it? What are the stats showing us? What can we expect over the next several decades? And what can our kids expect? Because when you look at it that way, this is something that we should be talking about.
Yeah, that's something that kind of came on the scene with, I hate to say it, but Elon Musk kind of made it. That's the first time I saw it, where he was like, hey, this is a problem, this is a problem, this is a problem, 5-alarm fire. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, is this a real thing? And it is.
Yeah, and sociologists that have looked into this will tell you that when you go back and you look historically at what happens to societies or cultures that enter into population decline, they also enter into cultural decline, and ultimately those societies inevitably collapse or are overrun from outside. And so when Elon tweets something like population collapse is potentially the greatest risk to the future of civilization, history is on his side. But here's what's different. We have never, in the history of the world, as far as we know and can look at and study, we've never come across a period where fertility rates are falling across the board everywhere. Populations are reaching peaks and entering into decline, and that is happening everywhere, on every continent, and everybody's kind of looking at that going, we're in uncharted territory. What does this mean for civilization? Elon takes the position, this is going to be extremely devastating for civilization. And a lot of people look at it. Like, I look at it, and I don't think it's good.
Yeah, it's confusing because for like a decade, they're like, we have too many people, climate change is a problem, let's not have as many people, too many resources need to be used. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wait, the real problem is we don't have enough people.
Yeah, that's right. I grew up learning that the world was overpopulated and feels crowded, and you start hearing, that there's billions, 8+ billion people on planet Earth. When I hear depopulation, my first instinct is it's about time. Like this will be great for us. But in reality, what the studies have shown that we'll get into in this episode is that with population growth, good things actually happen, and with population declines, really bad things actually happen. And so where I want to start with this is just kind of defining terms. Okay. So there's a fertility rate that you need to just maintain level population, and that's 2.1 children per woman, right? Okay. Which kind of makes sense because you have a woman and a man. They need to replace themselves.
Each other, yeah.
So they need to have 2 kids, and then the 0.1 comes along because, well, you have infant mortality and children who die before they reach the age of adulthood. And so replacement rate fertility is 2.1 children per couple. Now, let me show you a map of nations that are below that and nations that are above that. And what do you notice? What jumps out at you on this map?
There's a lot more blue, which is bad.
There's blue all over the place. All over the place. Every single country in Europe is below replacement fertility. The United States is below replacement fertility. Canada is below replacement fertility. Almost all nations that you would consider part of Western civilization are below replacement fertility. And so here's some stats. In 2024, every single nation in the European Union failed to achieve replacement level fertility rates. Collectively, the European Union has a fertility rate of 1.46. That is low.
Okay, that is low, because when you look at 2.1, 1.46 doesn't seem dramatically off when we work with numbers, but that's much different in this regard.
It is dramatically lower than replacement level fertility. It means that your population is going to crest and you're going to enter into depopulation within some generations. Right now, there are 132 nations around the globe with fertility rates too low to replace their existing populations. And that list is expected to grow for the remainder of the century. The nations that are above are actually falling. Every single one of the 15 largest economies in the world, including India and China, which are the ones that are above 1 billion people, have fertility rates that are currently below replacement fertility. And now, for the first time in a very long time, if all these projections hold true, and they seem to be, in fact, they seem to be accelerating toward lowering fertility rates, then the global population is expected to peak in 2064 and begin its decline, with global fertility rates plummeting through the end of the 21st century. So, for example, China is expected to have its population halved from 1.4 billion people to 732 million people by 2100, the year 2100. So we're seeing, like, all of a sudden the earth has grown, and there's lots of concerns for the strains that humanity puts on and how are we going to feed everybody and find room for everybody. Well, that is reversing, and everything is beginning to shrink. The nations that are the largest are actually expected to be decimated in their populations in the next century.
And that's the terrifying fact that, the 15 nations that make the world economy work are the problem. Because it's not just like, okay, there's some people over the fertility rate and they're going to carry us. Like, no, that's not going to happen.
So as a general rule of thumb, here's something that's interesting. The two greatest indicators as to whether or not a place has high fertility rates are whether or not they're a religious people and whether they're poor. It is the poor that have a lot of children, and it is the religious that have a lot of children. So if you go back and you look at the map of fertility rates, what do you notice?
Africa's going.
Sub-Saharan Africa, where there is, very, very devout religiosity, they're exploding. Where there's a lot of poverty, exploding. You go to the Western nations that have tremendous wealth, they're falling apart.
Yeah.
The ones that are secularized, their fertility rates are plummeting. And why would that be? Can you think of why that would be?
Because there's no reason other than if you want children to have children. There's no moral that says, okay, hey, this is important for us as people.
Yeah, I've got money, and money suddenly becomes the god, and I need to protect it, and I need to build my 401k and my retirement and have the nicest house and the nicest car. And kids tend to get in the way of that, as we know well.
Kids are wonderful, but they're strained.
Yeah, they take, and so if money is your ultimate aim, guess what? Kids are kind of like, you know what? I need to pursue my career, and I need to make a lot of money, and I need to do all these things. And kids get in the way. And oh, by the way, kids are kind of a hassle. Like, they require things. They require, for sure, a selfless love, right? Yeah. It's a sacrificial love that the Bible commends to you as being this really, really wonderful, beautiful thing. But if you don't have any ultimate that's higher than your own interest and your own desires, then kids are just, well, if I want one, if I need something to hug, I guess I'll have one. But in terms of sacrificing my life and my desires to have a kid to pour into, to raise up another generation, like, that's going to cost me a lot. And so in our culture, you see people that are like, I'm proud of my decision not to have kids. Look at me. I can wake up late and I can go do things on Saturday without the burden of children. And that's how self-absorbed our culture has gotten. And that is devastating the world. It is actually making us commit, in a sense, like an ideological suicide where our nations are withering as a result.
Yeah, the consequences are far greater than it seems in the moment.
Yeah, 100%. And you see that, like, where you're deliberately choosing childlessness. So, in our own country, we commit more than 1 million abortions a year. But according to the World Health Organization, there are 73 million induced abortions around the world every year. 6 out of 10, think about that, 73 million abortions every year around the world. And 6 out of 10 unintended pregnancies end in abortion. 3 out of 10 of all pregnancies around the world end in abortion. And so what used to not be widespread has become so widespread now that out of every 10 pregnancies that would have resulted in a baby, 3 of them are terminated before pregnancy, not to mention that general fertility to begin with is falling. And so that certainly does not help. And so we ask the question, how severe is this? And I want to, here's a sociologist whose name is Dr. Ben Wattenberg. He authored a couple of books. One's The Birth Dearth, and the other one is called Fewer, which is clever. And he says, never in the last 650 years, since the time of the Black Plague, have birth and fertility rates fallen so far, so fast, so low, for so long, in so many places. So the last time that cultures have hit a season like this where we've just said no thanks to life, like it was imposed, and the Black Death that wiped out a third of Europe, and now we're doing it and in many cases, and in most cases, voluntarily to ourselves. We're walking away from the next generations.
Yeah, because history's gonna look back and be like, well, they had the Black Death. What's going on with you guys? Anything big going on in your world? We're like, no, we just decided not to have kids.
Just idolatry and despair, global warming is going to make the planet miserable. And that's a thing. Like, people don't want to bring kids in the world. But I can promise you, you would much rather live in the world today than at the time of the Black Plague or any time before that, when the world was harsh and cruel and you didn't have technology and grocery stores and air conditioning and ice makers. The world is a much better place and more convenient and comfortable place to live today. And in fact, the odd thing is that is what's making people walk away from children, is I like my comforts and I don't want anything imposed on me. That's probably the number one reason people are walking away from children.
Yeah, I think my generation especially, it's the fear of the world. It's like, hey, how could I, in good conscience, bring a kid into this world? Everything's so messy, everything's so broken. Then you look at history, like you said, like, hey, the Black Plague, it was pretty difficult. Like, the world was pretty dark at that time. There's always a point in history, like, yeah, the world's messy, but that's not having kids isn't going to help this situation.
Yeah, and okay, let's turn this in the biblical direction. Like, hard times do not give you a pass from having kids. Like, the Bible comes, and if there's one attribute of God that just screams again and again, like this is his driving desire, it's life. Like, he is the God that overcomes the grave with life. He's the God where the very first commands out of his mouth to Adam and Eve is what? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, right? Like, he is a God that wants life to come forward. He wants life to thrive. He wants families. He wants husbands and wives to raise up godly children and wonderful next generations. And you think, okay, well, then the world went, the fall, fell, right? So, I mean, maybe we shouldn't have kids in a fallen world. God gets so disgusted with the world and how wicked it had gotten that he floods it and starts over. And then what is his first command to Noah? Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So it's like, oh, wow, okay, even in a fallen world, God is still very much about you having children. But wait a minute. It gets even worse. God's own people go down to Egypt. They're enslaved for 400 years. Like, surely if you're living in oppression and slavery, like, you should not have children, right? Then you open up to Exodus 1:7, and what does it say? But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They're fruitful and multiplied. Sound familiar? They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong so that the land was filled with them, and God blessed that. Or let's jump to Jeremiah. When all of the people of Israel are taken away into exile, conquered by the Babylonians, taken in captivity, and in captivity, God says, yeah, you probably shouldn't have kids in Babylon,
not the time.
Right? Like, this is going to be hard, finances and provision. Listen to what Jeremiah 29, which is everybody loves that chapter because it talks about God's plans to prosper you, right? But listen to Jeremiah 29:6. In the middle of captivity, he says, take wives, okay, and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters, multiply there, and do not decrease. Does this sound like God's looking at, oh no, the circumstances of the world, you probably shouldn't have kids? No, he's like, in every single situation, he's like, press on, grow the covenant, teach your kids. And he promises that blessing will come. By the way, Jeremiah 29:11, the promise of blessing and not to harm you, comes after he's like, have bunches of kids.
Yeah.
Grow. Malachi talks about like why God gives marriage. Malachi 2:15. And it says, did he not make them one with a portion of the Spirit in their union of marriage? And what was the one God seeking in that? Oh, that they might have happiness and 401ks and big
Comfort,
houses and wonderful vacations. He just answers, godly offspring. Why does he do that? Godly offspring. So guard yourselves in your spirit and let none of you be faithless to the wife of your youth. God places an incredible value on marriage and family, and he commissions his people, raise up godly kids, right? And then you look at the Psalms, and what does the Psalm say? Now here's, there's nobody who writes the Psalms, whether it's David or others, that doesn't have a difficult life back in the day. I mean, each and every one of these faces persecution, faces difficult trials, wars. And what does he say in Psalm 127, verse 3? Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. So God comes and says, hey, having kids is a blessing.
Yeah.
Like, it is my way of blessing you. It's my way of preserving the covenant. It's my way of growing the kingdom. It's my way of blessing the earth. It's a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. So God's saying it's a blessing, it's a blessing, it's a blessing, it's a blessing. And what does our culture say?
Not for me.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's a curse, and I don't want them. Or at least many of us who choose to say, you know what, like, it's not the time. You know, I've got other things to pursue. And God comes to his people and says, this is an important mission. Gospel, you serve the Lord, but then God gives all of these. I mean, the first institution he creates is marriage. Think about that. And then he gives children. And everything after that, you know, governments and economies and everything else, they rank way below those institutions, and we have cheapened marriage and family. You were telling me about a survey that you saw, I don't know, a couple of years ago, where it was asking priorities in life of what is most important in life. Do you remember what it said?
Yeah, Gen Z was for sure, and this was the newer generations is, I mean, it's all what you would think. It's success, it's financial security, and then way down the line, I think it was number 7, 8, or 9 was start a family.
Yeah, let me see if I can find those numbers, because when I thought about it before the thing, so it's 2024, right? Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. So ages 18 to 34, this was Pew Research. I don't know if it's the same one that you saw, but ages 18 to 34, consider, when asked, is a career important to you, like really important, an enjoyable career, it was 68%. Then when asked, is getting married important? Like, this used to be one of the cornerstones of life. So if 68% is a career, man, marriage has to be, it's 20%. Consider that important. Having kids, 22%. That's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, this one I saw is, I want to blank before the age of 30. And only 12% said become a parent.
Yeah. What were the other?
Top one was 66% said finish my education, start a career, become financially independent. 55% just want to follow their dreams. 38% enjoy life before I have the responsibilities of being an adult.
Mm-hmm. And all that would make sense if we were in a material world where there was no God and this life is all there is.
Yeah.
Like, if all it is just it's a contest to see who can get the most toys and who can get the most wealth and who can, you know, get the most fame and power and control and climb the ladder the fastest, that makes sense. But if there's something bigger, if there's a mission, a purpose to this life that's bigger than just the material, by the way, the grave swallows all of that. Your career gone, your money gone, your house, you can't take it with you. All of it is gone with the grave. And yet God comes and says, hey, living souls, a marriage, kids, those are eternal, everlasting souls that you get to pour into. That is an eternally valuable mission. Pursue that. And we go, no, I got stuff to chase. I got idols to, and so we walk away from the family. We walk away from the notion that having children is a really beautiful calling for men and women. And it's sad, but it's all over the world. And so we see the Bible very much has something to say about this. And in fertility rates, here's something that's fascinating to me. You see that there's a huge divide between church attendance and non-church attenders and how many kids they have. So when they're breaking down all of these stats, like, what do we do? You know, we've got fertility rates that are, you know, falling off a cliff. They found that women who attend church weekly have 2.1 children on average. That's a
fertility rate.
That's replacement fertility rate. While women who never attend church have an average of 1.3 children. That's significant.
Yeah.
So, you know, a third less fertility. That's lower than what it was in Europe. During the Great Awakening, where you've got, of the 1700s, where you have like this surge in faith, like everybody's coming to the Lord, super influential, one of the greatest revivals in the history of the world. How many children do you think the average woman had? 1790. Throw that date out there.
All right, I'll give 6.
8.
Oh,
8.
that's a lot of kids.
So, I mean, when you think about that, the 2 produce 8, which means every generation is growing fourfold, right? So we're a far, far cry of that. But it's interesting to me that the people who have no faith, I mean, you can kind of reason it out. The people who have no faith, who believe only in a material universe, they're not having kids.
It's costly.
They're dying out, by the way. Their ideology will also die with them. And so you've got churchgoers that are barely repopulating, which that number should be higher, quite frankly, I think. And people who don't believe don't want to have kids. Why would I have kids? They just get in the way of my true gods. I mean, and that's the reality. So here's a map of the United States that records which states have more live births than recorded deaths. And right now, there are 26 states in America that have recorded, this was 2021, so it's COVID year. So 26 states recorded more deaths than births.
Which is,
in
can't
2021.
exist with that.
That's right. Yeah, you're eventually going to go into depopulation. And so according to the Congressional Budget Office, so this is a nonpartisan thing in D.C., they say that the annual number of deaths in the United States is expected to exceed the number of births by 2043. So within the next 2 decades, the United States, minus immigration, the United States will begin to enter into population decline. We will not be replacing ourselves. Our numbers will start going down. And so every subsequent population growth will have to come from immigration unless we get this fertility rate figured out. And so are we? I mean, because you look at the stats and it's not a lot promising unless there's a religious revival, a spiritual revival. Listen to this. 2024 survey found that 45% of women that are currently childless between the ages of 18 and 34, only 45% of them want to have children, which means most 55% of them are childless by choice. They don't want children. That's if more than half of women are like, no thanks, that's not good. 26% of young adults claim that fear of global warming is factoring into their decision on whether to have children. Have you ever talked to somebody who believes the world is going to end within a decade?
For sure.
There are that, quite frankly, absurdity, and I know that's probably going to win me friends, is making people say, I don't want to live life. I don't want to raise up a next generation. I'm going to close up shop and say, you know what, it's all over with. And so we don't get married. We're not going to have kids. We don't believe in a future. We just live in this constant state of despair, and they're being rocked by mental health issues and anxiety and everything else that comes along with that. And when you really study it, it becomes absurd. But that's impacting it. Abortion, right? Yeah. Even though Roe versus Wade was overturned, the annual number of abortions actually rose in 2023. So we still have more than 1 million abortions every year. And think about what that does to our fertility rates.
And it's ironic because the fear of the world ending is actually causing us to end the world voluntarily.
100%. It is a bizarre thing. Here's another one that's just interesting that plays into this. In order to have children, what do you need? You need a man and you need a woman, right?
Yep.
Which is a heterosexual combination. I'll just throw out there as a premise to this next point. So Gallup does a survey of Generation Z, people born between 1997 and 2012. Among the adults, 22.3% of that generation identify on the LGBT spectrum. That's not great for fertility.
No.
Right? So you've got a significant amount of women who are saying, I don't want to have kids. You've got another group that identifies in a class that can't have kids. You've got abortions where they're selectively choosing to get rid of their kids, and the nation is beginning to go. And one of the things that you see in the Bible is when God rewards and blesses a nation, you see life flourish. And when judgment falls on a nation, you see the opposite. There are passages where when God is bringing judgment on the nation of Israel for its wickedness, he says, Ephraim is going to be judged. There's not going to be pregnancies. There's going to be no live births. They're going to fall. And he associates that with a dearth in fertility because bad things happen when you lose fertility. And so here, and there's other facts. You think about that. There's other indicators that fertility is falling that's not selective. So, for instance, they looked at 223 separate studies in the Human Reproduction Update. It's a journal. And listen to the quote from this. They said, among unselected men from all continents, the sperm count declined 51.6% between 1973 and 2018. That means
It's crazy.
that countries all over the planet, and it's like, what's happening to our sperm count? Like, drops more than half between 1973 and 2018. And here's the bad news. That number is not slowing down, it's accelerating. So if you go all the way back to 1972, the average is about 1.16% a year, sperm count declines. Since 2000, that number has jumped to 2.64% per year decline in sperm counts. Now, you can still have kids with that precipitous a decline in your sperm count, but if it keeps going at this rate and it shows no sign of slowing, in fact, it's speeding up, you're going to start seeing widespread infertility issues if sperm counts keep dropping like this. So even if you want to have kids,
It's not the
that
plan.
judgment might fall on you. And so this is not good news. You know, we've been trained. If you go back into decades ago, 50 years ago maybe, there was a guy, a Stanford professor named Paul Ehrlich, who wrote The Population Bomb. And in that, everybody read it, and I was like, oh my goodness, overpopulation, it's the worst thing in the world. We're going to have mass starvation, and we're going to have devastating plagues and widespread societal unrest, and the government's going to have to just come in. They're going to have to do forced sterilizations. They're going to have financial penalties for having kids. And by the way, they did that in some places. But what they found was that since 1968, the global population has grown from 3.5 billion. So he wrote that in 1968. Since then, it's gone from 3.5 billion to 8.2 billion. And did everybody starve to death? Like, no, the resources necessary for survival became even more plentiful and accessible than before. Societal impacts of hunger fell. Poverty rates fell dramatically. Infant mortality has fallen dramatically. Infectious diseases have all lessened in the decades since this book. Less people die of the flu. Less people die of malaria. Less people die of all these diseases that they were so worried about in 1968. And in fact, being that there's more people and more networks and more provision and more farms that are being cultivated, there's less problems in the decades since Ehrlich's his dire warnings. And life expectancy has gone in which direction since 1968? It's
Way up.
soared. And so, like, even when you think about it, the Earth has 5 billion hectares of existing farmland. That means that every single household on Earth could have its own 5-acre farm right now and have another 10 acres of habitable land just for legroom. Like, so, I mean, would you feel crammed on 15 acres?
Not at all.
No, and I mean, there's a ton of people that are in high rises and big cities, but this idea that we're being crowded out, it's not true. And by the way, guess how far back you have to go to hear the first people saying, it's too crowded, we're all going to die. You have to go back to 1700 BC.
Oh, wow. Way earlier
Right?
than I anticipated.
Way earlier, where they're writing myths. The Atrahasis myth, which is about a Mesopotamian storm god, Enlil, who's up in the heavens, and he's like, the noise of mankind has become too much. There's too many of them. And so to reduce the populations, the gods unleashed disease, famine, and infertility. And Enlil declares, let the womb be too tight to let the baby out. So the Sumerians, which is like the oldest civilization you study in history class, was already saying it's too crowded. It's
Too many people.
It wasn't too crowded. You get to the Greeks, and Polybius writes about the impacts of why the Greek Empire, the Athenian Empire collapsed. And he said, in our time, all of Greece was visited by a dearth of children and a general decay of population. In other words, we walked away from family and children and pursued our pleasures, and we became rotten. And he said, this evil grew upon us rapidly and without attracting attention by our men becoming perverted to a passion for show and money and the pleasures of an idle life. And guess what happened to Greece? It's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone. That you don't see that trend ever end positively. Tertullian in 200 AD, right? Listen to what he says. This is a church father. In 200 AD, when the global population was 3% of what it is today, And listen to what he says. Tertullian warns that the earth is overcrowded and lamented that the earth can scarcely provide for our needs. This is 200 AD, and they're like, "It's the earth is ending. Everything's coming to an end." No. And the problem with depopulation, like just to spell it out, is it puts an enormous strain on the young people who can no longer take care of the elderly. Right? So let's take Social Security. Back in 1940, Social Security, comes around. Guess how many workers there were to fund every single retiree in Social Security?
I mean, 20 would be a good number.
42.
Oh.
Right? So a massive, and this is from the Social Security Administration. In 1960, that number had fallen to 5.1. So 5.1 taxpayers are out there supporting the Social Security recipient, right?
Okay.
Now it's 2.8, right? And guess when everybody talks about like fiscal collapse and we can't meet our obligations and we're going into debt, they point to three things. One, Social Security, which is what? It's funding the retirement of our seniors that paid into this, that our government's stolen from, and now it's on the backs of the younger taxpayers to have to meet these obligations, and debt. Medicare, which is the health of our seniors, now on the backs of the young, and then Medicaid. These three programs are driving our country into fiscal collapse, and it's all on the backs of so many fewer workers that are having to take care of this enormous bunch of retirees. Well, if we keep producing fewer and fewer and fewer and fewer, guess what happens?
They don't exist.
You can't meet your obligations, or you can't care for your elderly. Your markets dry up, innovation dries up. Everything about that is not good. And oh, by the way, the only way that you can support your society is to import the labor class, which means any distinctives that your nation has as a national identity are overrun by cultures from all over the place that come in, and you lose your identity, you lose your nation. All of this is sourced by this declining fertility. And so, we'll finish here, because it's not just, Sam and Will saying, this is a problem. This is nations all over the world going, we're entering into decline. This is not good. We've got to do something to fix this. So let me talk about what some countries that are very smart are doing to try to reverse these. Singapore now offers new parents $24,000 in cash.
It's awesome.
Along with promises of subsidized childcare and 3 months paid leave just to have a kid. Please have a kid. Why? Because their fertility rate is half of what you need to maintain population. They're entering into decline. Taiwan has spent $3 billion on incentives, including 6 months of paid leave, cash benefits, free childcare centers, tax breaks. People still aren't having kids. Russia promises $7,000 bonuses to families that have more than 2 kids. Italy and Greece now provide baby bonuses. Hungary offers $30,000 to newlyweds, promising loan forgiveness with the birth of a 3rd child. Why are they doing this? Spain, get this one. Spain has created a cabinet position, like in their cabinet, called the Minister of Sex, to address the country's falling birth rates. Why are they doing this? Because they know that if this doesn't turn, if fertility rates continue to plummet, if depopulation comes, their nation's over, because no nation in history has ever survived that. Right? And here's the bad news. In a book, Empty Cradle, Philip Longman, sociologist, wrote, as governments going as far back as imperial Rome, because guess what the emperors tried to do when Rome was collapsing because of falling birth rates, by the way, in large part. Decadence and falling birth rates. All of a sudden, you had the emperors coming out going, oh, we got to give incentives for people to multiply because our national base, we're all dying. And guess what? Everybody's coming in and we're being diluted, and foreign influences and everything else, and we're falling apart. He says, as governments going back as far back as imperial Rome have discovered, when cultural and economic conditions discourage parenthood, not even a dictator can force people to go forth and multiply. Not all the financial incentives and everything else that you throw at people. If you teach me that this material world is all there is, and the only gods that I see are material, I don't want to have kids. So what's the solution to this? It's to get back to the ethic of the Lord, which is children are a blessing from the Lord. blessed is the man who has his quiver filled with those arrows. And we recognize that we serve a God of life. And one of the greatest things we can do for the kingdom of God is to raise up children who love Jesus, who follow after his ethics, who want to bring the beautiful ethics of the kingdom of God down into this world to make life worth living, to make things beautiful, to care for those that don't have what they need. Like, that's the beautiful path, and God has ordained marriage as a very beautiful thing. It's the first thing, institution he ordained, and families right behind it. And we've walked away from them, and we, as a culture, desperately need to begin seeing those things as worthy pursuits, beautiful pursuits, and eternally meaningful pursuits.
Get married and have some babies.
Amen. All right, so we'll leave it there. I want to thank you for watching this episode of In God We Trusted. Join us next time as we look at another cultural issue and what the Bible has to say about it.